Hello everyone, I would like to welcome you back to our series of videos where we're planning out the design of a website and we're building a mock-up of it. I mentioned that we would be looking at some different wireframing software applications, but I think I'll save that for a future video. In this video I just want to go ahead and make a brief sketch using Microsoft Paint, which is just basically the most rudimentary art application that you can find on a PC if you have a Windows operating system. And then we'll actually go ahead and start building out a website with this layout using just pure HTML5 and CSS. So speaking of HTML5, I have a diagram of some of the most common containers that you can use, so that way we can avoid just creating a lot of containers using div tags and custom selectors that we invent later on. So header, nav, main, section, aside, article, and footer. So these are just a few of the containers that we can use to arrange information on our page. So in the header we could have a banner for our website. In the last video we were talking about making a comic book site, but I'm not going to stick to that topic because it's just not my cup of tea. So we'll just make a website for computer-aided instruction, the name of my YouTube channel. And then we have a container for nav, which will be, the navigation bar, the links to other pages on our website. And then we'll have a section called main. And the bulk of my content is going to fall into main. I'm going to actually put all of these different, the next 3 different containers within the main container. So you can have containers within containers. If you're using div tags and then you start having like div tags within div tags, it can be really confusing. So I don't have a problem with just using these default HTML5 containers. So main, section, aside, we'll put these on the right hand side of the page and we'll just use them to contain whatever information we want. We could use section to contain maybe like a calendar. We could have aside just to contain a list of events that are coming up, whatever we want on the margin. Article, we'll use that for just pasting in our just text for any paragraphs of text that we want on the page. And footer will just be at the very bottom of the page. It'll have information about the website, any disclaimers, maybe a logo, things like that. So I went ahead and drew a mock-up of what we could have our page look like, just using Microsoft Paint. You can use any art application you want. You can just sketch this out on a piece of paper with a pen. It doesn't really matter. So we'll determine our margins later. Maybe I want my nav bar to be narrower. I don't think this looks good. But this is something we could do if we want to. I personally say we should have the header, the nav bar, and the main section all of the same width. And the footer should definitely be 100% width all across the screen. So this is something we can do. We can have a column on the right hand side of the screen with this section and an aside. What we want to, as far as what content we want to appear in these 2 different containers, we'll decide later. But I will go ahead and show you what this will look like in the end. We have a banner. I squashed it, so that's why it looks compressed and pixelated and unattractive. So what I would really want to do is to figure out what the dimensions of the page are going to be in the end and custom make a banner to meet those dimensions rather than take something and just warping it to make it fit within these dimensions. So anyways, this is what the website will look like in the end. What we would want to do next after we have everything set up, because right now in this lecture I just want to focus on the layout. We can go back later in a future video and think about the color scheme. Hello everyone, in this video we're going to pick up where we left off in the last one by actually building out this sample page using Notepad++. We're just going to be using HTML5 and CSS code. And I did make one tweak. I decided that I want this navbar container to be the same width as the main container, so I went ahead and did that so it's not narrower than the main container. So let's go ahead and open up Notepad++. Let me create a new project. Let me save it as, I'll save it as somewhere on my desktop. Let me create a folder. I'll call it layout. You can call it whatever you want. I'm going to call this, let me go to HTML. I'm going to call this layouts.html. Let me create a new file. Let me save this one as a style sheet. I'll call it layout.css. You're probably wondering, why didn't I call it style.css and index.html? Well, I'm not going to put this in production. I'm not going to host this on a server anywhere, so if it's just going to sit on my computer, I can call it whatever I want. But ordinarily, the first page on whatever web project you make, you want to call it index.html. And if you only have one style sheet, it's probably okay to just call it style.css. Although you're welcome to change the name to whatever you want. So I'm going to go ahead and create a folder. I'm going to call it images. I want to go ahead and find a copy of my banner. So 1 second, please. Now I'm going to paste it within my images folder. And I'll be able to add it to my page like you see up here in this example. So let me go to layout.html. We're going to start our web page the same way we start any HTML5 page, with doc type. HTML. Sorry, I'm typing really poorly. HTML lang equals en. And we'll have an opening and closing head tag. We'll have an opening and closing body tag. And then we'll have a closing HTML tag. The closing body tag and closing HTML tag are going to be the last things you ever have on an HTML page. Maybe I'm wrong, maybe there's some JavaScript that you can put beneath it, but as far as HTML coding goes, that's the last thing you're going to have. So, and everything that you want to display on this page is going to go within the body tags. So don't have like a paragraph tag above the body tag, because that's just not bad. I mean, even if it displays on your screen, that's just not the correct way to do it. Modern browsers are really forgiving with mistakes, so you can leave out like semicolons and things like that, or quotation marks sometimes, but that's really not the way you're supposed to do it. You want to follow the textbook HTML5 coding instructions. So what else do we need besides, within the head, let's add a title. I'll just call it my layout or template, or whatever you want to call this. It doesn't matter. Let's add a meta tag. Here set equals UTF-8. And let's add a link to our CSS page. rel equals style sheet. That's saying, hey, this relationship is that it's the style sheet. If you don't have this included with your link, it's not going to work. So anything that we add in here is just not going to work if we don't have this and a link to the page. That's all we really need right now for the head tag. So let's get into the body tag. But first, let me open up Paint, and let's go back here. I have this image that's showing you the common names for different containers for HTML5. So let's go ahead and add all of these containers to our HTML page. So opening and closing header, opening and closing nav. Let me add some space between these to make it easier to see them. And, well, I'm not going to need this anymore. As you recall, we also have a container for social media links here and down here. So, div class equals, we'll come up with a name for our selector later. And then we'll have a closing div tag. This one's going to be above the banner, which is in the header. You know what? I'm going to get rid of this class and type in ID, and I'll explain the difference between div class and div ID once we start coding with HTML. I mean, with the CSS. So one thing I want to do is I want to copy everything within the body tag so far. Let me save this page, and I'm going to paste it in here. So that'll give me the tag names without having to type it all out. I'm going to get rid of these greater than or less than symbols and the entire closing tag because I don't need it. I just need the name one time. And let me add these opening and closing curly brackets. And our CSS page is well underway. I did have the custom containers for the social media links, so I'll go ahead and create one called social media. I'll create two. I'll create one called social media 2. So what's the difference between having a period in front and a hashtag in front? Well, when you have a selector with the period in front, that means you can use it over and over again throughout your page. So div class equals social media. I might have a paragraph. I might call it class or social media later. And I can do that if I want. So whatever attributes for this selector that I add, so I might have it floating, I might have the font change, I might have the text color change, things like that. Sorry. That'll affect everything that I call whenever I call the class of social media. And you can use it over and over again for different tags. But if I use the hashtag in front, instead of class, I'm going to use ID. So div ID is social media 2. And you can only use it once per page. So I personally never use IDs and I never use hashtags really, because I like being able to use code over and over again. So I always just put a period in front of any custom selector that I create, and then I call a class on the HTML page whenever I want to use it. So anyways, this is just going to be float to the right. I think that's all I need to do. Let me go here. Let me add some links to different social media platforms. It would be awesome if MySpace made a return and took all of Facebook's, well, I can't call them customers, but all of their users. MySpace used to be gigantic. It was bigger than Facebook. Well, obviously it was invented before Facebook, if I'm not mistaken. but it was a social media platform that everybody talked about back in the day. So I'm going to save this. Let me open up my folder. Let's put a copy of this page in my browser so we can see it as we work. Okay, one thing I want to go ahead and do is copy the name of this file for my banner, and I'll go ahead and add that to the page. These should be floating to the right, so let me see what's going on. I didn't save it, so that's why. Anyways, yeah, you have to be really careful when you're working on a website to save your CSS page, save your HTML page. Every time you make any edits, it doesn't save automatically. So let me go to my header. I'm going to add my image here. img src equals images slash name of the file .png. And let me add a closing quotation mark. Let me add an alt tag. So just a decayed logo. I made that a long time ago. And I want this to be centered on the page, so let me just go ahead and add some inline code. Style equals display block semicolon margin left auto margin dash right auto semicolon quotation marks. Looks good to me. Now let's go ahead and add a border around all of my different containers. Not at the header, because the header is really just a picture, and I don't really want a border around social media links, so let's add one around main, so border border solid. Let's make it 1 pixel, I guess. That'll be good. I'm gonna make a copy of this. Add it to everything else. Besides social media. Refresh my page. Everything just looks like a big 1 pixel wide just line. But these are all of my containers stacked together. I need to add some heights and some widths and some margins to make them feel a little bit more lifelike. Or I could just go into my HTML page and add some like paragraphs and some text here, but I don't really want to do that. Well, I will. Let me add some links for my menu. For my main, let me just add a H1, my closing H1. I'm going to do this for every section. I'm just going to put its name in a sec. I'm just going to put a title so you can see each container a little bit more easily. So. I'll add one for the footer as well. Save, refresh, and that looks pretty good. I don't want all of my containers stacked. Again, I want some to be floating to the right, and I want to have some gaps between the different containers. So let's go ahead and add some margins and things like that to each of the containers. So let me move this over. I also don't want it to be the full width of the page. So let me put some thought into this. I'm going to change main first. Margin left, margin right will be auto. I'll do the same thing for the nav. I guess I'll do the same thing for the header, because I'm going to have other stuff in there besides the banner. So let's also decide what the width's going to be. 1366 by 768, that's what a lot of people say is what you should design your websites for, screens with those dimensions, with that resolution. I think that's fine, but I think it's going to be too big, so I'm just going to go for maybe just 1,000 pixels for the main section. So let me add a width, a maximum width, because I want it to be able to shrink if we would need it to. I'll use 1100 pixels. I'm pretty sure that's what I'm using in my example here, because I changed it. That's cool. We'll do the same thing for the nav bar. Let's save it. The footer, I want it to be 100%. I want it to go completely across the screen. Let me give it a background color to have it, to make it stand out a bit more of black. So 6 zeros. And let's make the font color white, so 6 Fs. I saved it. Let's refresh. That looks good. Let me add a margin to the top of this. 15 pixels. That'll add some space. I'm going to add a margin top and a margin bottom to my navigation. Let me go ahead and add a border to my navigation. Oh, I only have one T. I was wondering why the margin for the bottom didn't look that big. So it's easy to make mistakes. Now, one thing you'll notice is that all of the text is pushed right up against the edge of this container, which I don't like, so I'm going to add some padding. I'll start with here, with the navigation. So, padding. Let's give it a top padding 10 pixels. It doesn't need a right padding. Give it a bottom padding of 10 pixels and a left padding of 10 pixels. Or maybe I should do 15. Let me click save and let's see what it looks like. 15 is good. I'll give all of my containers these dimensions. Maybe a 10 is too much for the top padding. Let's just give it a padding of 1 and a bottom of 1. Save it. Yeah, this is going to be better. You don't need much padding because all of the fonts automatically give some space. So I was mainly concerned with just the left padding. So I could have just had padding dash left 15 pixels and that would have saved a lot of time. So let me swap this code out of all of these. For all of these, I should say. Save it, refresh. Looks fine. Now let's add some actually, let me go to my layout. These three are all going to be within the main container, so I don't need to have them stacked like this. Let me put the article first. And then we'll add section and aside. Save, refresh. And as you can see, they're all within. Let me add some margins so that there's some space between them. So let me add a margin top. Actually, for the main, let me go ahead and get rid of this. Now that I don't have that header, the article is just going to push directly up to the top of the container. I have this padding is what's pushing this over a little bit. Well, I'm not going to worry about margins to the left of anything since I have this padding here in the main container pushing it over. So let me add some top and bottom margins for article. That's good. Let me add some for, let me copy this for section on the side. Save, refresh. Looks good. Let me add a bottom margin for a side as well. Excellent. Let me add this bottom margin for article since I'm eventually going to move these so that they're to the right of the article. Anyways, this all looks good. So let me go ahead and make these float to the right. Actually, let me change the widths first. Let's just do the simple things first because once we start floating things around, it gets really tricky. So what's a good width? What was I using for my... I believe I was using 350 or something like that. I was using 275. I just went and looked. So aside and section. And these are going to be floating to the right. The article had a width of... It didn't have a full width. It had a minimum width of 275 as well, and it had a maximum width of 725 pixels, if I'm not mistaken, something like that. Actually, let's work our way to it. Let's have a maximum width of 900. So this, well, okay, let's think about this like logically. This container is going to have a maximum width of 1100 pixels. So the main container, if everything's going to be sitting side by side with each other, this is going to have a width of 275. There's going to be 15 pixels of a margin between article and section, and then 15 pixels of a margin between section and the edge of the container. So that's going to be 15 here, 15 here, and 15 here. So 45 pixels I have to consider of space. So 1100 minus 275 minus 45. So 700 and something pixels. So let's make article maximum width. Let's just say 700 and let's just go 700 pixels for now, and we'll change it as we need to. I should have did the math in my head a little bit before I started filming this, but I didn't. So floats right. This is where things are gonna get really, really tricky. Save, refresh, and where are they? They're buried underneath the footer. So once you start playing around with floats, if there's something that's appearing that should be appearing beneath the floating items, you need to add the code clear : both. So footer, that's the first thing I want to have up here is clear both. So that way floating items can't hide under it or hide over it or float over it or anything like that. So this is going to ensure that this is going to get pushed down a row when you have things that are floating. And I also don't want these floating outside of the container, so why are they doing that? Let's go to layout. Here's a little trick. Anything that you have floating needs to appear above the item that you want them to be floating next to. So if you have a wall of text here and then you have a picture, the floating item needs to be coded in the HTML page above the wall of text. So let me move these two containers. Whoops. Let me move these two containers so that they're sitting above the article. Save it, refresh it, and now they're all side by side. And you're probably wondering, well, I didn't want these to be 3 columns. I want it to be 2 columns, and I wanted a side and section to be one stacked on top of each other. Actually, you know what? Let me add... Never mind. So let me go to my layout CSS. Which one did I want to be above the other? A side should be below, so let me add the clear both code here. Save it, refresh it, and now clear aside is going to appear beneath section. Let me make this main container bigger because a side and section can't all fit into the container. Well, actually they should. This is kind of... The main container should have stretched to make some space for both containers. Well, anyways, let me go ahead and add a minimum height of maybe 500 pixels or something like that would be good. That's at least going to make sure that these two containers fit within the larger container. And let me make this article a little bit narrower because it's maximum width of 900 is too big. This should be a minimum width of like 250 would be good. A maximum width of 700 would be better. I didn't add px, so it wasn't changing. That adds a gap of space. which is pretty good. I could make it a little bit smaller gap, but that's okay. Let's see. Let me add a margin right to section on the side so that it's not pushing up against the edge of the main container. 15 pixels. And we're actually pretty much done. One thing I don't like is the social media links beneath the footer. I want to have it within the footer. So let me go out to layout. Let me copy this container. Let me put it above the text for footer because it's floating to the right of it. Let me refresh. And there we have it. That's kind of hard to read. So what I could do is add some CSS code for these links so that the link color is different, but I don't want to go through all that right now. Let me just change the container so it has a white background to just take a shortcut. That's not good. I should probably just change the anchor, the link colors. But that's basically all we wanted to do for now, was just to show you how to arrange different containers so that they're side by side and that they're stacked one on top of the other, and that they're not overlapping like they were when the section on the side were pushed up on top of the footer. I added clear both to footer to make sure it stacks beneath these different containers, and also had clear both for a side this container so it's stacked beneath section and not alongside it. Playing around with floats is not an easy thing to do. It's really difficult and it takes a while to get used to it. It's kind of like playing with magnets. If you don't want everything to be attracted to the magnetic force of the floats, you have to add clear colon both, or clear colon right, or clear colon left, or whatever, however you're using float in the containers above it. But like here, I did not put clear colon both for this heading 1 because I want footer, the text for footer, to be alongside these social media links. Otherwise I could just type in style equals clear colon both as an inline code, save it, refresh it, and now footer is going to be beneath these social media links, and that makes the footer section bigger, but I wanted it all to be alongside each other, so let me get rid of this, save it, refresh, and that looks pretty good. So basically this is something that you can continue to work on. If you want to experiment with adding a color palette to your website, here's a website that I like called colorpalettes.net. I'm going to click pastel palettes, and you can just click around from page to page and find a palette that you like this one. Click it, and it'll give you the hexadecimal codes. So I can go into my CSS page and say, hey, I want the background color for section to be this. Let's just go ahead and do that, see what it looks like. Maybe we can make the entire page background color this. Let me save it. Now let's preview the changes. that doesn't look great. Yeah, I'm not really feeling these colors. This green's okay, but let's try this one. That's not so bad. It's a lot softer. Now let's go to main. So this is something that we can play with. I'll leave it up to you. One thing I don't really like is this border around the navigation bar. I'm not a fan of it, so let me get rid of it. The border added some padding or some margins. So I might want to make the margin top and bottom a little bit bigger, so just more space between the navigation bar and these different elements. 20 is not bad. I'll go for 25. That's pretty good. Let me get rid of some of these other borders since I'm adding background colors. Save. I'm adding some more margins. 25 doesn't appear to be big enough, so let me try 55. Okay, that's not gonna work. 15 is good. Let me add a padding to the top of 15. There we go. So you have to play around with padding and margins and eventually make the page look the way that you want it to look. So far this isn't looking really pretty, to be perfectly honest. If I started adding content, started adding pictures, maybe use a wallpaper instead of a solid color for the background of the website, it might look better. Maybe if I replaced this image with one that was a lot bigger, so it's going the full width of the website, it might look better. If I replace these links with social media icons, that would look a lot better, I can tell you that right now. So there's a lot of things we could do, but this is just getting started. And I just want you to start thinking about how you can arrange different containers using floats and margins and things like that. So I hope this video was helpful for you. Thank you for watching.